He was one of the standout action figures of the original line, a line that inspired future generations of writers and artists behind the follow-up adaptations of the Turtles. Ironically, the action figure that inspired a fan-favorite character would later have a surprisingly hard time getting a new release in the 2012 line. Join me today as I explore the story of the 2012 Muckman and the complicated history behind its action figure release. Like many other characters that got mutated on this show, Garson Grunge had appeared many times before as a sewer worker, usually as a victim of the Monster of the Week. Perhaps because of his bad luck, he decided to become a garbage collector. One day, he happened to be collecting garbage from a building that housed a clandestine Krang lab, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Upstairs, Bebop and Rocksteady were going through Baxter's grocery list, which included a special chemical that could help him develop a mind control serum for Karai. This chemical was called Reagent X. The Turtles followed the criminal duo to the lab, and a battle ensued, during which a canister of ooze was thrown out a window and exploded on Garson's face. This transformed him into a monster composed of garbage and sludge. And once he looked up to see who he had to blame for it, he saw the Turtles escaping from the lab. But Garson had a heroic side to him. Let me rephrase that. He had a heroic body part: his left eye. Garson realized that his eye could leave his socket, talk to him, and act as his conscience. The Eye, who was nicknamed Joe Eyeball, saw this as an opportunity for Garson to be a hero, and he convinced him to save a man who was being attacked by the Purple Dragons. As a result, Garson became a TV hero and was given his superhero nickname, Muckman. This would annoy Mikey, since he considered the Noxious Avenger a much more fitting name. But Muckman didn't want to be famous, and he started running away from his fans, even melting into a sludge to pass through door undercuts. The Turtles were suspicious of him, so they decided to make contact, unaware that they were being blamed for his transformation. It was then that Muckman demonstrated some sort of anger-induced telekinetic power that Mikey nicknamed the Trashnado. And that wasn't his only trick. He also threw a highly toxic slime at them, slowing them down long enough to be caught on camera, just before vanishing into the darkness. Bebop and Rocksteady, who were getting tired of falling for the booby traps on all the abandoned Krang labs, decided to recruit Muckman to do their job for them. They convinced him that the Turtles were responsible for their mutations as well, and that only a chemical known as Reagent X could help them revert to normal. Of course, it didn't take long for the Turtles to locate the Bebop and Rocksteady van.
I can't believe they keep driving that uber-conspicuous van.
Not everybody can be as ninja as us.
Muckman fell for the duo's deception, but Joe Eyeball knew right from wrong, and he protested to the idea of robbing a lab. Muckman's anger was stronger than Joe's, and he proceeded to steal the chemical for them. However, after seeing how he was being used as a shield, he came to his senses and slimed Bebop and Rocksteady. The duo escaped, and after realizing what had happened, Muckman apologized to the Turtles. He even used his TV fame to tell the press that the mutant turtles caught on camera were just kids in costumes, like the Pulverizer. Muckman's next appearance was during the last stand against the Triceratons, a fight where he was annihilated with the rest of the Mutanimals the first time, and presumably survived after the Turtles time-traveled to prevent it. It's presumed that Muckman joined the Mutanimals during this event, but he was never seen again with them, at least not in canon stories. It's very likely that Muckman stayed a Mutanimal, but wasn't included in future episodes because of the size of the cast. But these budget restrictions weren't a problem for the Amazing Adventures comic, a non-canon spin-off universe. Muckman had a story in that book, where he was being controlled by Baxter's Mousers, and later regained his freedom with help from the Turtles and Joe. He was still a part of the Mutanimals in this universe, and he fought alongside them in the Robotanimals miniseries, where he was temporarily turned into a robot. Another spin-off universe was the one from the Panini magazine for the European market. In one story, Muckman was liquefied by heavy rain, and as a result, found a calmer life in the sewer currents. However, after seeing his friends and Joe in danger, he realized he had the power to help people, and it wasn't time to retire yet. Muckman also appeared in the mobile game TMNT Legends, where he could use all his powers to defeat his opponents. Just like the original version of this character, Muckman was heavily inspired by the Noxious Avenger, a franchise Ciro Nieli loved so much he even tried to include Toxie in the series, something that ultimately couldn't be done. Still, before he was adapted, he was already shown on a movie poster on one of Mikey's bedroom walls, a poster with the tagline, "Garbage Walks Among Us." His origin episode was written by Todd Casey and directed by Alan Wan, and while it was a new interpretation of the original, it still shared many plot points with the Fred Wolf origin. Like in Muckman Messes Up, the Turtles were blamed for his mutation, which also similarly involved Bebop and Rocksteady. The Turtles were also affected by Muckman's ooze, but in that case, it was due to Compound X7. In contrast, Reagent X didn't seem to have anything to do with Muckman's mutation. A significant difference, though, was that Joe was no longer a sidekick, but a part of Muckman. Ciro's concept designs for the character already implied his New Jersey origin as the creeper from Camden, just like Toxie. While he was more in scale with the human characters, they kept most of the disgusting features from the original toy. These designs were later adapted by Jose Garibaldi. Adapting him into 3D was a real challenge for the team because his body sludge needed all the proper overlapping animations. If that wasn't enough already, he also had a whole additional character living inside of him that would eventually come out and perform by itself. Garson was initially voiced by Nolan North, but later played by Grant Moninger once it was decided the character would become Muckman. Grant also voiced Joe Eyeball. Since the original action figure was so popular, releasing a new one was a no-brainer, and Varner Studios sculpted it. Playmates announced a 2015 release, but after finding the figure too horrifying, only a small number were produced by the end of the year. This perceived scarcity skyrocketed his price in the secondary market, where it was once sold for $300. Playmates eventually tried to place Muckman on Series 19 in 2017, but since it was almost the end of the line, numbers were already small and hard to find. But according to legend, Muckman was actually mass-produced. He just couldn't get his spotlight on the shelf. In 2018, Playmates was already promoting the next iteration of the Turtles, so they created a collectors club called Sewer Squad. Collectors could trade pizza points to get a Loot Crate box of goodies, and one of their options was Muckman. The figure eventually found its way to Amazon in large quantities, becoming accessible to casual collectors and putting an end to the artificially inflated value of the figure. Interestingly, from prototype to shelf, Muckman lost some details, such as his manhole cover. And unfortunately, his eye was permanently attached to his head. And that was the odd story of the 2012 Muckman. There's at least one other version out there that I'll be covering soon. Did you have this version of his action figure? Is this your favorite take on the character? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.